Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Dead or Alive for the Sony PlayStation. This game was released in 1998, a whole 2 years after the original arcade version. And as you can see here, on the back you can see it's got the one or two players, memory card, one block. Although strangely enough, I find it weird that this game supports the DualShock functionality of the DualShock analog controller, but on the back of the case here, it's not noted at all. I still say one of the funniest things about this version is this quote by Ryu Hayabusa. The women are total knockouts. So they're saying the actual character of the game thinks that the women are total knockouts, but I just always thought that was funny. But the weirdest thing about this is if you look on the back here, these are actually Sega Saturn screenshots. Because these backgrounds you see here don't actually appear in the PlayStation version. And another weird thing, well, other than Kasumi's hair being white, is on the strategy guide here, if you look closely, that's a Sega Saturn screenshot, as is this. That's the only PlayStation screenshot on here. And if you were to look closely, or if you know this game really well like I do, you'll notice the models are different since the ones in the PlayStation, the Sega Saturn version, were just shaded a little different than they were in the PlayStation version. They just used a bit of a different technique to make the models. And here is the Japanese version, which I'd showed in one of my other videos. You'll see it has that thicker case, or in some regions you might look at this and think, oh, it's a normal case, and our cases are just skinny. But what's good is on this version, it actually has all PlayStation screenshots. So they're not kind of quote-unquote false advertising this. Well, since I've blabbed on enough about this, let's get right to the game. If you look here, I've already put the Dead or Alive disc into the Sony PlayStation just to save a little time. So let's just close the cover here, turn on the power, and then we just pan up to our PlayStation up here, and you can see there goes our great old Sony Computer Entertainment of America logo that's popping up. And then it'll just go right into the game, and let's take a look right now. And of course, when the game starts up, it displays the Tecmo logo to tell you that that's the company that made the game. Here's a quick little loading break. And here's your intro. Take a look. As you can see from that intro, there were a bit of differences from the Sega Saturn version, like of course the inclusion of Ayane and Bast, who were not even present in the Sega Saturn version, since I'm guessing at that point they weren't even thought of. And you'll see the title screen, of course, is a lot different as well, since it's a different version of the game. And as you can see, you have your cast of characters from the previous game, and all the female characters now have 14 costumes, with the male characters having 5 costumes. Raito now has 1 extra costume that he didn't have in the previous version of the game. And I chose Ayane here, since she's a new character to this version of the game. And of course, you'll notice right away, as comparison to the Sega Saturn version of the game, the background is entirely different. It is this weird beach level instead of the level that Zack had in the other game. And of course the music's a little bit different too. a lot of the music in this game will be different compared to the Sega Saturn version. And if you're if you know anything technical about video games, you'll notice that the models are actually shaded different in this game, as I had mentioned. The models in the Sega Saturn version were more texture mapped, whereas these are what's called gourd shaded, which is kind of like taking a polygon and more or less stretching it around to make a shape. It ends up having a much smoother look, but you lose a little bit of texture detail, because in the Sega Saturn version you could actually see like the seams in clothing and stuff, and it just looked a lot cleaner. Although for a PlayStation version this doesn't look too bad. Of course, this is the same Ryu Hayabusa theme we were familiar with in the arcade and Sega Saturn version, but as you can see, this is a much different stage. The only thing I can credit this version with as having like above and beyond the other versions is by far the lighting in this version of the game is a lot better than the Sega Saturn version, at least. And I know I had mentioned this slightly in the Sega Saturn version video, but I liked how in the Sega Saturn version the danger zone actually was like a grill, and you saw like this kind of like lava stuff underneath, whereas in this game it's just like either the plain ground like you just saw in Hayabusa's level, or in some levels it's just more or less the ground flashing. So there really isn't any big separation between the regular ground, except for the regular ground is just like a regular texture, and then the rest of the ground is just plain looking. So that's how you kind of know it's the danger zone. And this version of Dead or Alive came out in Japan on March 12th of 1998. In North America, it came out on March 31st of 1998. And then in Europe, they had to wait until July of 1998 to get this game. Whereas the Sega Saturn version actually didn't come out too much before this. It was October 9th of 1997, as I might have mentioned in the other video. So it wasn't like it was a full year, it was just actually quite a few months. But this version was built from the ground up. As you can see, the background at Li Fang's level there was just like a snowy level with this weird little castle in the background. And if you listen very carefully here, you'll hear Jan Lee's music. While this is a good theme for him, I still like the Dead or Alive / Sega Saturn version a little bit better. I just thought that was like a nice, like it sounded more, I'd say, kung fu-like or more Japanese-like, and it just felt more like this karate guy would have this as his music, in my opinion. And actually, at one point when I was younger and I was playing around with PlayStation games, I actually ripped the data ISO and actually changed all the audio tracks in this game, and I put that as this in it. In this game, I put the Sega Saturn version music, and I just thought it really fit really well even in this level. And that's one thing that I know a lot of fans were mad at when they went from Dead or Alive 1, since this was a lot of American fans actually played this version only, and then they went to Dead or Alive 2. Even in the Dead or Alive 2 hardcore version, there's only 8 costumes for female characters, not the 14 you would see in this game. And of course, here's Genfu like he is. And as I was mentioning earlier, you can notice by the life bars there, they're just more of like a plain life bar. They don't have that big thing going over the top of them. You can tell that they're different from the Sega Saturn arcade ones. Now what I have done in this game is I have the Ayane system voice, which the system voice thing, as you know from my video, the Dead or Alive 4 system voice, every character in that game has their own system voice, but in this one, you had Kasume Ayane, and then there was a default one. And then in the Sega Saturn version, there was a Kasumi voice, but of course Ayane wasn't around yet, except if you count her being the training dummy that you beat up in that game. And you'll notice when I'm doing the moves here, a lot of Ayane's moves, which were in all the other versions of the Dead or Alive games, actually are in here. Of course, a lot of them were made a bit smoother than they were in this game. In this game, I just look at the way Ayane's moves are. They just feel very rough compared to, like, let's say you play Dead or Alive 2 or even Dead or Alive 3 or 4. It feels like they're a lot more polished. And here's another brand new stage. This is the Tina Arena. Although now that I'm actually thinking about it, I think it looks more like a discotheque than an arena, especially because of the flashing panels for the danger zone in the background there. But I still like it a lot better than that, basically the highway corner that she had in the Sega Saturn arcade versions. And Tina's wearing her weird outfits where she has the skirt and the sports bra on. She has a lot of them like that, even one that's a miniskirt police outfit. And if you want to see all the costumes in Dead or Alive 1, at least this version, I have a full costume guide on my website, so you can actually see what all the costumes in this game look like. And another reason I created that is for myself, so if I'm playing this game, I'll know which costume I'm picking. I just decided to go with the default costume for Ayane, since I just think her purple dress here just looks really cool. The only big problem in this version of the game is there is a huge clipping problem with the bow on the back, especially when she's walking to do her victory stance. The bow will often clip her, the bottom of her dress and get a little messed up looking. Okay, next we're on the Bayman here, and I'd actually tried several times to play what you're seeing right now, so this is probably the best of, I'd say at least 5 or 6 playthroughs of this. And every other time I'd played through this, he wore his scuba suit. This is the only time I can remember him wearing the default costume, and I think he looks a lot better in it, because honestly, his scuba suits just look pretty bad in this game. They look like, why would you even want to fight in that type thing? And of course, as you remember, the stage in the Sega Saturn version was a lot different than this. And in this game, I actually have what's called the extra voice enabled, so the actual voices they're using for the wind poses can sometimes be a lot different. And actually, speaking of that, if you remember when I played the Sega Saturn version, I played as Rido, and he would keep saying one catchphrase at the end of the battles. Well, in this version, they actually gave him another one, so it feels a little better now. And here's our second character, who's the new to this game. I don't know why, I just like that part of the song where he's like there and it plays this these tones like do 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 do, and I just think it makes him seem a lot more menacing. So I just wanted to give you that whole experience there. And he's one of those characters that you can either get right through him, or he's gonna like do all his crazy throws and he's gonna beat you up even in this early in the game. And if you remember in like Dead or Alive 2, he'd have that kick where he just kicks and turns around and you go flying. In this game, it seems like it's even more unbalanced, because if he hits you with that, he takes out half of your health, which is really sad. But yeah, of all the music in this game, this has to be my favorite theme, the bass theme, as you could hear in the intro of the video there. And this was one of those fights where, until I actually viewed the footage after playing it, I did not realize it was so close. I thought I had won by a bigger margin than that, but I had like a little grain of health left, and yeah, I could have easily gotten hit by him and lost. And if you're wondering here why the music just kind of seems to start in the middle of everything, is if you look at the time up there, you'll see it's like over 6 minutes. It's because Kasumi actually gave me quite a hard time in this playthrough, so I actually had to fight her several times, but to allot for time here, I cut out a lot of my losses because it just would have got boring if you just saw me lose and lose and lose. And if you're not familiar with what Kasumi's wearing here, this is her her school gym clothes, which if you've seen a lot of anime, you'll probably recognize it, because they usually wear these very little shorts and then like a shirt. And then the same happened here with Rido. You're going to see it just basically cut into the thing after the music more or less has started. But sadly, compared to his Sega Saturn arcade versions, he doesn't have that thing where he's like crouched down and lightning strikes and he appears.
I always thought that was a really cool intro. When I remember when I got the Sega Saturn version, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool that they have like this intro thing for him. But no, it's not in this version at all. Now, had I been able to defeat Kasumi before 6 minutes, I would have been able to face Ayane, but sadly, no matter how many times I tried, I could not get it to happen. Funny side note is, the time I actually practiced playing this, I actually did it, but I have not been able to reproduce it. Well, this is Dead or Alive on the Sony PlayStation. Definitely a good version, built from the ground up. A little different than the Sega Saturn version, but I would definitely say it's worth your time, and I'm going to tell you right now that after I win here, I cut out the credits because they're exactly the same as the Sega Saturn, except instead of saying Sega Saturn version, it says Sony PlayStation version, so I didn't see making you sit through that again.
As you could see, Dead or Alive for PlayStation is a great version of the game. Totally remade from the ground up, it really stands up for its time. As I'd mentioned earlier, the American version didn't mention the DualShock, but here on the spine card of the Japanese version it actually has the DualShock analog controller logo, so you actually do know, if you were in Japan, that your game supported that. Well, that's enough with the PlayStation version. Now we're going to take a look at the special version of Dead or Alive released on the Sony PlayStation-based ZN1 arcade hardware, which is called Dead or Alive Plus Plus. It has some added stuff and some tweaked stuff. Let's take a look.
Okay, from what I can tell, this version was actually released after the PlayStation version. But sadly, there's little to no information about this game. Now, you see the tournament and the tag match. Now, tag match is not what you think it is. It's actually just, you have two characters, and once one gets defeated, you move on to the next one, so there's no actual tagging, per se. And as you can see, I like how the selection screen is here with the character models, instead of just having pictures. Each character has at least one unique costume to this game that was not in any other versions of the game. Like, you'll see Ryo here, he actually has his new costume he's showing off in this version of the game. A lot of the music is very different in this game, that they've changed a lot. Now, there are a few audio problems you might hear in this version of the game. That's because the emulator doesn't emulate this 100% perfect, so like the voices might not always come through, but for the most part, this game is working quite well on this emulator. Now, the strange part about this version of Dead or Alive is there is no intro to speak of. If I were just to let the title screen, the Dead or Alive Plus Plus title screen there, just stay for a while, all that would happen is it would start going into its demo where it just shows the AI fighting itself with different characters. You wouldn't have any kind of like even intro video like in the console versions. And that's another thing you're going to notice. The character order is actually a bit different in this. You don't have like Zack and then Hayabusa and then Li Fang. They more or less mixed them up for this arcade version. And this actually arcade version, as I had mentioned just a few moments ago, I believe this came out after Dead or Alive for PlayStation. As you'll notice when you see a few of the character costumes, like the costume that Genfu had there, the costumes would later go on to be in Dead or Alive 2 and 3. But sadly, the costume that Kasumi's wearing, her special ninja costume as I tend to call it, was never in any Dead or Alive game ever, which I just really find weird. Like, there's even a few Li Fang costumes here and there that they brought back for Dead or Alive 2 Ultimate, but this ninja costume Kasumi wears just never was seen anywhere else at all. And of course, there's a lot of costumes you're going to see, like the costume Tina's wearing. It would come back later in the Dead or Alive 2, but with, I believe it had her blonde hair. I might not have mentioned that much here or there, but originally Tina was a brunette, but eventually she became a blonde. I'm really not sure why. Maybe the Japanese developers thought, like, blonde hair was more synonymous with an American. Like, you know, Tina's supposed to be American, so she has blonde hair. I'm not sure why they turned her from brown, which I always thought looked fine, to blonde. Unless they thought that, you already have Kasumi, who has brown hair here, if you notice that. And eventually she would have red hair. So I never understood why they changed the hair colors of the characters. But yeah, this would be the last game that Kasumi would have her brown hair, as would Tina. In the Sony PlayStation version of this game, there are actually a few costumes where Tina has the blonde hair, but it's only shown for a couple of the costumes. Whereas the majority of Tina's costumes, she has the brown hair. And as you can see Bayman here, this is his Dead or Alive Plus Plus exclusive costume, which is actually a pretty good look for him. He looks more like military to me. Instead of wearing the beret, he just has his like his shaved head type thing that you see a lot of military guys have, or they would call it the military cut. And I just thought this was a good look for him, but to my knowledge, I don't believe this costume ever came back to any other Dead or Alive game either. So, yeah, I just find it weird that they never brought back any of these costumes. It would be nice if, like, maybe even in a future game, you'd see some of the costumes that were in this game and never made it anywhere else. Especially Kasumi's ninja costume here. I just think it's a really cool looking costume, and it makes her look like she could really kick somebody's ass. And that's another thing I always have a gripe with in Dead or Alive is they always have the swords on their back, but they never can use it for anything. Even if it was like a fatality or something, it would be nice if they could just pull that sword out and actually use it for something or other. But just like the Sony PlayStation version, you'll see the Danger Zone has no real coloring. But the explosions and the lighting, just like the PlayStation version, are really nice, so it doesn't look like muted or hard to see like it was in some of the earlier versions. And now you see Bass here, he has more of his, like, I quoted how the PlayStation magazine said it when they saw for Dead or Alive 2. He has more of his Hollywood Hulk Hogan look here, which, honestly, when you do think about it, you look at how Hulk Hogan went to that Hollywood Hulk Hogan thing, yeah, he does kind of have that look, and it does look a lot like the wrestler himself. So I'm guessing they just wanted to be like, oh, it's a wrestler, and Hulk Hogan's recognizable, so let's kind of give him that scruffy look that Hollywood Hulk Hogan has. And strangely, the music that Bass has here is a little remixed as well. Doesn't sound like the same old music we were used to in the awesome themes of the PlayStation version, but still a good theme nonetheless. And if you're wondering why the models look a little bit smoother in this version than in the PlayStation, of course, when it comes to any kind of emulator, you're always going to have a bit of a smoothing, because it's running this old arcade game in software. So it's going to make the game look a little bit better. And of course, if any Dead or Alive fans are interested in how you run Dead or Alive ++ in the MAME emulator, all you need is the doapp.zip file, which contains the game. And the most important part is there is the tps.zip, which is the BIOS file to run this game. If you don't have that, this game will not run at all. So it's just kind of like having neogeo.zip for something like, let's say, King of Fighters. It's just something you need to play the game. And now we're moving on to Li Fang here, who has a costume that... I don't believe she had this costume in the PlayStation version, but this was brought back in some of the later versions of Dead or Alive. I believe I remember it being in the Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore. And you have that same snow area that you had in the Sony PlayStation version. I always thought it was kind of cool how the corner, it's like, come on, press start. It's like saying, it makes me think of like Tina in Dead or Alive 2 when she's like, come on. So I just thought that was kind of cool. And there is Li Fang's 3-part throw that became famous in Dead or Alive 2. And I hadn't mentioned it in the PlayStation portion of the video, but when I first had bought Dead or Alive, which was the game I actually showed you, I believe I replaced the case a couple of times because it got broken over the years, but when I first was going to buy it, I was at FuncoLand, and the guys at FuncoLand told me that Dead or Alive was like Tekken, but not as good. And yeah, to this day, I always think back to that day to think if I just listened to those guys and never went to KB Toy Store and bought my copy of Dead or Alive for like a few dollars, I would have never found out about this awesome series of video games that I now enjoy quite a bit. And this is what I was mentioning in the PlayStation version. Had I got to Ayane with enough time to spare, I would have been able to play against her. I'm not sure if in this version you fight her every time, but this is the exact stage you would have seen on the Sony PlayStation. It's just slightly different music, but yeah, this is what it'd look like if you fought her on the Sony PlayStation, but you'd have to beat Kasumi in less than 6 minutes, meaning every character and then Kasumi, and then you'd come to this stage in the Sony PlayStation version and face Ayane. So, yeah, that's something that's kind of hard to do. I can usually do it with Kasumi, but I was just unable to do it with Ayane when I was trying it several times. And I always thought it was cool how they could have the flower petals around like Kasumi and even Ayane, even in this early version. And there's a new costume for Raido. I believe this actually was the same third costume. No, actually, the third costume he had in the PlayStation version, I believe, was just a variation of his other ones. And once again, they've changed the music for Raido. I don't know why they changed it to this music. I always liked his theme he had in the other one better. I thought it was a bit more like, now you're fighting the enemy, let's get you all hyped up by playing this really cool music type thing, but, you know, I guess they figured new arcade version, new way to fight the boss, but either way, it's still a pretty cool, theme that you're hearing here. And then we're gonna fight the final set here against Raido to beat the enemy and win the game here. And you'll notice more of that disco-looking floor stuff. And of course, since I don't read much Japanese, I have no idea what it says here. But I'm guessing this is something story-related that it's saying. What is this? My only guess is that the emulator was kind of glitching there, and it was supposed to have those sounds to coincide with the text going on the screen, so it didn't like come up properly. But if you see this is very reminiscent of how Dead or Alive 2 does it when you like play something like tag mode. In other words, what it's doing right now is it's actually showing clips of me fighting the enemies, just like it would in Dead or Alive 2 when you do tag mode, which I always thought was a cool thing, unlike the arcade version of Dead or Alive, which showed, basically, it was just a pre-scripted thing of the character fighting. It wasn't actually you fighting. This is actually what I was doing in the game, which I still to this day thought was really cool. But bottom line is, the Dead or Alive PlayStation-based versions, being Dead or Alive and Dead or Alive Plus Plus, are very good. They have a lot of cool new things, and they're definitely worth your time if you're a fan of Dead or Alive and you've never tried them before. So I recommend everybody at least pick up the emulator and give these games a try. And as you'll see, here's the name, enter your name screen with a few more spaces to enter a few more characters. So I highly recommend these games. I recommend anyone who's a fan of Dead or Alive or fighting games, give them a try. And I shall see you in my next video. Later.